I never thought a single night could change the rest of my life, but it did. Behind a mask, in a room full of strangers. Even now, 3 years later, I can still hear the violin music echoing in my mind. Soft, haunting, like the soundtrack of a dream I can't quite wake up from. It was the night I met him, the man behind the mask, and the night everything I thought I knew about love quietly unraveled. Back then, my name was still Melissa Winters, and I was 28, a woman who smiled politely at the world while quietly falling apart inside. I just called off my engagement after discovering the man I thought I'd marry had been living a double life. Not another woman. No, something colder. Lies. Layers of them. So many that by the time I uncovered the truth, I couldn't tell where my own reflection ended and his deception began. For months after, I stopped trusting my own heart. I went through the motions. Work, sleep, wake, repeat. My world became beige, muted, predictable, safe. Then one afternoon, my best friend Claire barged into my apartment like a hurricane wearing lipstick. "Melissa," she announced, holding 2 shimmering masks in her hands. "You're coming with me tonight." I blinked. "Coming where?" She said, "To the Winter Masquerade Gala," she said as if it were obvious. "Charity event, live orchestra, champagne, mystery, everything your life is missing." "I'm not going to some ball. That's ridiculous." "Exactly," she said, planting one of the masks against my chest. "You've spent a year hiding. Maybe it's time you hide in plain sight." That night, I gave in. Maybe because I was tired of saying no to everything that scared me, or maybe because a small, stubborn part of me still believed in fate. The ballroom was like stepping into another century. Golden chandeliers dripping light over marble floors. Laughter mixing with the soft hum of the orchestra. The air smelled faintly of roses and candle wax. And for the first time in months, I felt alive. Invisible, yet somehow seen. I remember standing near the edge of the dance floor, holding a glass of champagne when I felt it. A gaze. Not a casual glance, but something that felt like recognition. I turned, and there he was. Tall, dark suit, a silver mask covering half his face. But it was his eyes that stopped me. Piercing, blue, intense, and searching, as if he were seeing through every guarded wall I'd built. He smiled just slightly, and in that smile there was sadness. The kind that only someone who's lost something real can carry. He walked toward me with quiet confidence. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. "No, just hiding." "Then we have that in common."
His voice was deep, calm, a little rough around the edges. We started to talk, and somehow everything around us faded. The music, the laughter, even the people swirling in elegant circles. It was as if the world had narrowed down to the 2 of us, masked strangers speaking in truths we hadn't told anyone else. He told me he'd once believed in forever, until life reminded him how fragile it could be. I told him I'd stopped believing in promises. He didn't argue. He just said, "Sometimes promises are only broken because life had better timing than we did." I laughed, softly, the kind of laugh that escapes before you can stop it, and he looked at me like it meant something. Hours slipped away unnoticed. We didn't dance much, but when he finally asked, it felt inevitable. The music slowed, and his hand found mine. There was something old-fashioned about the way he held me. Steady, careful, like I was something he didn't want to ruin by holding too tightly. I remember the smell of cedar and rain on his suit, the warmth of his palm against my back, the way my heartbeat began to match the rhythm of the cello. I didn't even know his name, and yet it felt like I'd known him all my life. When the final song began, he whispered, "Do you believe in moments that don't make sense, but somehow feel right?" "I think I do now," I said. He smiled behind the mask. Then remember this one. And then he kissed me. Not hungrily, not urgently. It was a kiss that felt like a promise whispered too soon, like a page turned before the story was ready to be read. A kiss that said, "I see you." And then he was gone. I tried to find him in the crowd, weaving through dancers and laughter and glittering masks, but he'd vanished. No name, no goodbye, just those eyes, blue, impossible to forget, burned into my memory like a secret I was never meant to keep. That night, I walked home under the snowfall, my heart confused, but awake for the first time in years. I didn't know it then, but that stranger behind the mask had just rewritten the rest of my life. If you're listening to this and believe in fate, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I want to know how many hearts still believe that love finds us when we least expect it. And don't forget to subscribe to Possible Hearts for more real stories, real hearts, and real possibilities. Because this was only the beginning.
Some nights don't end when the music stops. They echo softly, endlessly, long after the lights have dimmed. For weeks, the masquerade lived in my mind like a half-remembered dream. The way he looked at me, the weight of that final kiss, the mystery of his sudden disappearance. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than a beautiful illusion, one of those fleeting cinematic moments life throws your way to remind you you're still capable of feeling something. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again, the man behind the mask, the stranger with the blue eyes I could never forget. Claire noticed, of course. She always does. "You've been smiling to yourself lately," she said one morning over coffee. "I have?" "Uh-huh. You've been doing that thing, the dreamy half smile. Who is he?" I shook my head, laughing softly. "There's no he, Claire. It was just a moment." "A moment doesn't make you look like that, Melissa. You look like you've been sleepwalking through starlight." I wanted to tell her the truth, that I didn't even know his name, that I'd been replaying every second of that night, hoping to recall some detail, something I could hold on to. But I couldn't. How could I explain falling for a ghost? Still, life went on. Or at least it pretended to. Work deadlines, grocery lists, quiet evenings with Netflix and herbal tea. But even in the most ordinary moments, something had changed. The world looked a little less gray. I caught myself humming again while washing dishes. I even started sketching, a habit I'd abandoned after the breakup. Somehow, that night had lit a candle in the dark corner of my heart. Then, one morning, that light began to flicker. It started with a wave of nausea that made me stop mid-sentence during a meeting. At first, I blamed the coffee, then stress, then maybe a stomach bug. But as the days passed, the sickness didn't leave. Neither did the fatigue. I remember staring at the bathroom mirror, pale and trembling, whispering to my reflection, "You're fine. You're just tired." But my reflection didn't believe me. That evening, I bought a pregnancy test. 2, actually, because hope and fear always travel in pairs. I still remember the sound of the second-hand ticking as I waited, 3 minutes that felt like an eternity. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought the neighbors could hear it. When I finally looked down, 2 pink lines stared back at me. Positive. The world went silent. No music, no heartbeat, no breath. Just silence. I sank to the floor, the test clutched in my hand, tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, not from joy, but from the sheer magnitude of what now? Claire found me sitting there an hour later, still holding it. She didn't say anything at first. She just knelt beside me and pulled me into her arms. "Oh, Mel," she whispered. "It's his, isn't it?" I nodded, barely able to speak. "I don't even know his name, Claire. I don't know anything." And then, through tears, I said something that surprised even me. "But I know this feels right." She pulled back to look at me, confused. right? I don't know how to explain it. It's like it was meant to happen. Like fate wasn't finished with that night. Claire stared at me for a long time, her expression softening. Well, then maybe fate's giving you a new beginning. The next few months blurred into a quiet storm of emotions: fear, wonder, exhaustion, and a kind of strength I didn't know I had. I moved through doctor's appointments, morning sickness, and the strange intimacy of carrying a life that felt like both a miracle and a mystery. Sometimes at night, I'd rest my hand over my growing belly and whisper to the tiny heartbeat inside, "You were loved before I even knew you existed." And every time I said that, I'd see those blue eyes in my mind, like the universe reminding me that love doesn't always make sense. It just arrives. My parents were shocked at first, of course. My mother cried, my father went silent, as he often does when he's overwhelmed. But eventually, they both came around. "You're strong, Melissa," my father told me one evening, "and maybe this little one is your reason to start living again." He was right. Becoming a mother wasn't part of the plan. But then again, neither was falling in love with a stranger at a masquerade. Maybe plans were overrated. When Ethan was born, yes, I named him before I even knew if it was a boy. I remember the room fading away, the nurses' voices becoming distant. All I could see were his eyes. Blue, clear, familiar. The same eyes that had haunted my dreams for 2 years. I wept then, not from fear, but from recognition, because somehow in that tiny gaze, the past had found its way back to me, and yet the man behind the mask was still just a memory. But life has a strange way of circling back, and destiny, well, destiny doesn't forget.
Motherhood changes everything. The way you see the world, the way you see yourself, even the way you breathe. When Ethan came into my life, it was as if the universe had pressed pause on everything that used to matter. My apartment, once too quiet, now pulsed with laughter, cries, lullabies, and the rhythmic hum of a baby monitor. The walls that had witnessed my heartbreak now echoed with a softer kind of chaos. A love that had no conditions, no questions, no masks. People like to say motherhood makes you stronger, but for me, it made me truer. I learned to live in smaller moments. The way his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the way his blue eyes widened every morning as if discovering the world anew. Every time he smiled, it was like that night at the masquerade flickered back to life inside me. There were nights when exhaustion blurred into tears, when the loneliness hit hard, usually after Ethan was asleep and the silence returned. That's when I'd think of him, the man behind the mask. I'd wonder what he would have said if he knew. Would he have stayed? Would he have loved Ethan the way I did? Fiercely? Completely? Without fear? But then I'd remind myself, life had already chosen its course, and maybe it was better this way. Some stories weren't meant to be finished. They were meant to transform us. Claire was my anchor during those early years. She became Ethan's godmother before he could even say her name. She'd show up on weekends armed with coffee, toys, and the kind of optimism only Claire could pull off. "You were doing amazing," she'd tell me as she folded tiny onesies on my couch. "I'd cry over spilled milk, literally. And that," she'd reply, grinning, "is proof that you care. The world could use more people who care." Those were the moments I felt seen, not as a struggling single mom, but as a woman still capable of love, laughter, and new beginnings. When Ethan turned 2, something inside me stirred again. Not restlessness exactly, but readiness. It was time to build something beyond survival. So when a job offer arrived from a small publishing company in a nearby city, I took it. It was risky, yes. New city, new faces, new balance to find, but it also felt like a quiet invitation from fate. I'm proud of you, Claire said, helping me pack boxes. You're not running away. You're running towards something. I smiled. I just don't know what that something is yet. She placed her hand on mine. That's the best kind of story. The kind you haven't finished writing. The new city greeted me with the smell of rain on concrete and the faint hum of promise. Our apartment was small but filled with light. Ethan's laughter quickly claimed the place, turning every corner into a memory in the making. My first day at the publishing firm was intimidating, to say the least. Rows of glass offices, muted tones, and people who spoke in deadlines and data. But there was also a sense of purpose there, a hum of creativity beneath the corporate rhythm. And for the first time in years, I felt like more than just Ethan's mom. I was Melissa again. I spent my days editing manuscripts about love, loss, and redemption, stories that mirrored pieces of my own heart. At night, after putting Ethan to bed, I'd sit by the window, reading by lamplight, the city glowing quietly below. Sometimes I'd write in my journal, not about heartbreak or fear anymore, but about gratitude, about growth, about how healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering without pain. Still, there were moments when I'd catch Ethan watching me with those blue eyes, so full of curiosity and light, and my breath would catch. Because every time I looked into them, it felt like I was staring into a memory that had found a way to stay alive through him. He was a living echo of a single night I could never explain. And though I'd long stopped searching for the man behind the mask, some part of me still whispered his name into the wind, if only to remind myself he had once been real. One Friday evening, as I was leaving work, my new manager stopped me by the door. "Melissa," he said, "there's a client presentation next week. You've got a great editorial eye. I'd like you to help prepare the materials." "Of course," I said, surprised but excited. "Who's the client?" He smiled. "Watson Co. Investments. The CEO's a bit intimidating, but you'll handle it fine." I nodded, the name barely registering. Just another project, another chance to prove myself. But as I walked home, the name echoed faintly in my mind. Watts. Why did it sound familiar? That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he smiled sleepily up at me, his blue eyes soft under the glow of the nightlight. He said, "I love you, Mommy." And just before he drifted off, he added something that made me freeze. "Mommy, will I ever meet my daddy?" The question hung in the air, fragile and piercing. I stroked his hair gently. "One day, sweetheart," I whispered. "One day, maybe." Outside, the rain began to fall again, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat against the window. And as I watched it, a strange feeling crept over me, a sense that the story I thought had ended was quietly turning another page. It's strange how fate doesn't knock. It just walks in, calm, unannounced, and rearranges everything. The morning of the client meeting was cold and gray, the kind of day that smelled like rain before it even began. I remember holding my coffee tighter than usual as I walked into the office, the hum of conversation and printer noise filling the space. I'd spent the entire weekend preparing the presentation. Color-coded notes, polished slides, every word rehearsed. I wasn't nervous. Not yet. That changed the moment I stepped into the conference room. The air was thick with the scent of cologne and polished wood. The city skyline stretched out behind the glass walls, silver clouds brushing against the tall buildings. My manager, Thomas, stood near the window, chatting with someone whose back was turned to me. "Melissa?" he said. "This is Anthony Watts, CEO of Watson Co." The man turned, and for a second, the world tilted. Those eyes. Impossible, unmistakable, blue. Time stilled. The coffee cup in my hand went weightless. My breath caught in my throat, half disbelief, half memory. He looked older, sharper, his jaw a little more defined, his hair shorter, darker. But it was him, the man from the Masquerade, the man I'd been trying not to remember and yet never could forget. He extended his hand, polite, professional. "Anthony Watts," he said, his voice deep, steady. For a split second,
I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see. But then he met my gaze, and I saw it. Recognition, flickering, restrained, but undeniably there. Melissa Winters. I managed, shaking his hand. His touch was warm, familiar. I felt it all over again. The pull, the confusion, the ache of something unfinished. He smiled faintly, that same almost sad smile I remembered from the ball. Winters, he repeated softly. Beautiful name. Thomas didn't notice the tension hanging between us. He said, "Shall we begin?" and motioned toward the table. I forced myself to focus as I opened my laptop, my hands trembling slightly. Anthony took a seat across from me, composed, unreadable. The meeting began, filled with numbers, strategies, projections, words I barely heard. I could feel his gaze on me, steady, curious, cautious. Every time our eyes met, it felt like lightning quietly striking in the space between us. After what felt like hours, the meeting ended. Everyone stood, exchanging polite goodbyes and handshakes. My colleagues left the room first. I lingered behind, gathering my papers, pretending to check something on the screen. "Melissa," he said, his voice low. "May I have a moment?" I froze. "Of course," I said, without turning. When I finally faced him, he was closer than I expected, just a few feet away. The mask might have been gone, but the same electricity hummed between us. "It's you," he said quietly, "from the Masquerade." The words hit like thunder. So he remembered. He hadn't forgotten. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thin. "You disappeared," I whispered. "I know," he said, his expression shadowed by regret. "I didn't mean to. People don't just vanish. Not after something like that." He looked down for a moment, as if weighing every word. "There was an emergency that night. Family. My father had a heart attack. I left before I could find you. I tried to go back, but you were gone." I wanted to believe him. Every part of me wanted to believe him. But years of disappointment had taught me caution. So that's it? 3 years of silence because of bad timing? His eyes softened. "I thought about you, more than I should have. But life, it pulled me under. I told myself that night wasn't real, that maybe you were something I imagined. I almost laughed. You weren't the only one." We stood there in the silence that followed, the city humming faintly behind us. It was like standing on the edge of something vast and uncertain, a cliff I'd already fallen from once before. Finally, I gathered my courage. "That night was real, Anthony," I said softly, "and it didn't end just because you walked away." He took a step closer. "Do you ever think that maybe we were meant to meet again, just not then?" I didn't answer, because the truth scared me. If fate had brought him back, it wasn't just for me. It was for the little boy waiting at home, our son. But he didn't know that yet. Not yet. "I have to go," I said, breaking the spell. "My babysitter's waiting." "Of course," he said gently. I hope we'll see each other again." I gave a faint smile. In my experience, hope has a habit of surprising us. As I walked out of the conference room, my heart pounded like a drum. Half of me was trembling. The other half felt alive. Outside, the rain had started again, streaking the windows of the building as I stood there trying to breathe. It had been 3 years since that night, and somehow, impossibly, the man behind the mask had found his way back into my life. But destiny wasn't done with us yet, because soon, very soon, he would see those blue eyes again, just smaller.
There are moments that change everything, quietly, without warning. You don't feel the world shift until it's already moved beneath your feet. The day Anthony met Ethan started like any other Tuesday. I'd barely slept, caught between excitement and unease after the meeting. I kept replaying his voice in my head, the way he'd said my name, as if it tasted familiar. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd keep things professional. I had a job, a child, a life to protect. The past could stay where it belonged. But fate doesn't take orders. That morning, Thomas asked me to deliver some documents personally to Watts & Co. Anthony prefers face-to-face communication, he said. You're good with clients. Take your time. I almost said no. My instincts told me to. But then I thought of Ethan, his future, my responsibilities, the career I was rebuilding. I couldn't let emotions interfere. Not again. So I said yes. I dropped Ethan off at daycare on the way. He waved at me from the window, his curls bouncing as he pressed his tiny hand to the glass. Bye-bye, Mommy! I smiled. Be good, my love. Little did I know that fate had other plans for that day, and that it involved both of them. When I arrived at Watts & Co., Anthony was in his office, a sleek, modern space filled with books, photographs, and the faint smell of cedarwood, the same scent from that night at the Masquerade. He greeted me with a polite smile that didn't quite hide the warmth behind it. Melissa, he said, you didn't have to come in person. I wanted to make sure everything was in order. I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He gestured for me to sit, his eyes soft but searching. I'm glad you did. We reviewed the documents, our conversation easy but charged with an unspoken awareness. Every pause between words felt like an echo from that night. 3 years of silence condensed into stolen glances. When the meeting ended, I gathered my things quickly. I should go. Daycare pickup. You have a child? He asked. Casually, though something flickered in his eyes. Yes, I said, my throat tightening. A little boy. He smiled faintly. How old? 3, I said. Just turned last month. He nodded, something unreadable passing across his face. That's a wonderful age. Everything's new. Every day they teach you more than you teach them. His words hit deeper than he realized. Yes, I said softly. They do. That evening, as I arrived at the daycare, the rain had started again, fine and steady, blurring the world outside the car window. When I walked in, I noticed a tall figure standing near the doorway, talking with one of the staff. My heart stopped. Anthony.
He turned at the sound of my steps. Melissa, he said, surprised. I didn't know you came here. I blinked, trying to process. What are you doing here? He smiled sheepishly. I was dropping off some donations for the children's reading program. We sponsor them through the company. Before I could respond, Ethan's voice broke through the air. Mommy! He ran toward me, his little boots squeaking on the floor, his curls damp from play. I bent down, scooping him into my arms, and when he turned to look at Anthony, time stopped. Anthony froze, his eyes locked on Ethan's, and in that instant, I knew he knew, because Ethan's eyes, those deep, unmistakable blue eyes, were mirrors. The room went silent. The world seemed to blur. Anthony's expression shifted from confusion to realization to disbelief. It was like watching someone relive a memory they didn't know they'd lost. Ethan, oblivious to the storm in the room, smiled brightly. Hi, he said, waving his tiny hand. Anthony's voice cracked. Hi, Ethan, he whispered, kneeling down to his level, and when Ethan smiled, Anthony's breath caught. He looked up at me, his eyes glassy, voice trembling. Melissa? He said softly, almost a prayer. Is he? I couldn't speak. All I could do was hold my son tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, glancing between us with innocent curiosity. Mommy, do you know him? I swallowed hard. Yes, sweetheart, I do. Anthony stood slowly, his gaze never leaving Ethan's face. His voice was quiet, careful. He has my eyes. Tears burned behind my own. Yes, I said, he does. There it was, 3 years of silence, collapsing into a single truth. No more masks, no more pretending. Anthony took a step closer, then stopped, his emotions written across every line of his face. Shock, wonder, guilt, longing. I don't I don't even know what to say, he murmured. Then don't, I said gently. Not yet. He nodded, eyes glistening. Can I see him again? I hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. He's my whole world, Anthony. I need to protect him. I understand. I swear I do. But please, don't shut me out. I never meant to disappear. If I'd known... God, Melissa, if I'd known... Ethan tugged on my sleeve again. Mommy, is he sad? I looked down at him, my voice breaking. No, honey, he's just surprised. Anthony smiled through the ache in his eyes. More than surprised, he said softly. He's grateful. Ethan giggled. That's a funny word. Anthony crouched again, meeting his gaze. Maybe, he said, but it's the only one that fits. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence, gentle, cleansing, endless. When Anthony finally stepped back, he looked at me like a man seeing daylight for the first time in years. I'll wait for your call, he said quietly, however long it takes. And then he walked away, disappearing into the soft gray drizzle outside. I stood there, holding Ethan, my heart caught between two worlds, the life I had built and the one fate was quietly rebuilding around me. Some truths don't explode. They unfold, slowly, painfully, beautifully, like dawn after too long in the bark. For days after Anthony saw Ethan, I lived in a fog. Every moment felt heavier, every heartbeat sharper. At work, I kept my head down. I smiled when spoken to. I edited manuscripts about love and loss while living my own unwritten sequel. Anthony didn't call right away. He didn't show up unannounced. He just waited. Part of me was grateful. The other part wanted to hear his voice, if only to remind myself that I wasn't imagining all of this. Then one evening, he reached out. A simple message on my phone. Can we talk? Whenever you're ready. I stared at it for nearly an hour, the words blurring through my tears. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't entitled. He was waiting for permission, something my ex-fiancé had never understood. Finally, I typed back, tomorrow, 6 p.m., Café Del Mar. It was the same cafe where I used to sit during my pregnancy, journaling and wondering if fate would ever make sense of it all. The next day, the cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans and rain-soaked streets. The light was warm, golden, filtering through the window like a memory. I got there early, partly to compose myself, partly to stop myself from running. When Anthony walked in, time did that strange thing again, stretching and folding all at once. He wasn't in a suit this time, just jeans, a gray sweater, and that quiet gravity he carried everywhere. He looked human, tired, real. Melissa, he said softly, sitting across from me. Thank you for coming. I nodded, wrapping my hands around my cup. I deserved an explanation. He smiled faintly. No, I think I owe you one. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clatter of cups, the hum of low conversations, all of it blurred into background noise. Then he exhaled deeply, his eyes meeting mine. I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a day. That night, at the Masquerade, I felt something I couldn't explain. I wanted to find you, but by the time I came back, it was chaos. My father was in surgery. He didn't make it. My chest tightened. Anthony, I'm so sorry. He nodded, voice breaking. After that, everything fell apart. I took over the company, and for a long time, I couldn't feel anything. You became a memory I used to convince myself that love wasn't real. But when I saw you again, he paused, eyes glistening. And when I saw him, Ethan, I realized love doesn't disappear. It just waits. My throat tightened. You weren't supposed to see him. Not like that. I know. But I'm glad I did. I hesitated, my heart racing. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. How do you tell someone they're a father when they don't even belong to your world anymore? He leaned forward slightly. Melissa, I've spent years believing I'd lost something I didn't deserve to find again. Please don't shut me out of his life, or yours. I swallowed hard, staring into my cup. You don't understand. I built everything around keeping us safe. Ethan is my whole heart. Letting you in means risking everything again. His voice softened. I know, and I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to be part of the life I helped create. I looked up, meeting his gaze. He's happy, Anthony. He's loved. He doesn't need... He deserves the truth, he said gently. And so do you. Tears blurred my vision. He was right. I'd built my strength out of silence, but silence wasn't strength anymore. It was fear wearing a brave face. Do you want to meet him properly? I asked, my voice trembling. He blinked. More than anything. That Sunday, he came by our apartment. I'd cleaned every corner, as if tidiness could control emotion. Ethan was building a tower of blocks on the rug, humming to himself. When Anthony walked in, Ethan looked up, curious but unafraid. Hi, Anthony said softly, crouching beside him. Remember me? Ethan grinned. You're the man from school, Mommy's friend. Anthony smiled, eyes damp. That's right. Can I help? Ethan nodded and handed him a block. You build the tall one. So they built together, quietly, naturally, the kind of silence that doesn't need words. Every few minutes, Anthony would glance at me across the room, his eyes saying everything his lips couldn't. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm here. At one point, Ethan giggled and said, You make funny faces like me. Anthony laughed softly. Maybe we're a little alike. You both have the same eyes, I said before I could stop myself. Ethan looked up at me. Really? Anthony met my gaze, his expression soft but steady. Really. Something shifted in that moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. The past began to loosen its grip, making space for something new. When Ethan finally went down for his nap, Anthony lingered by the doorway. I don't know what happens next, he said quietly, but I know I'm not running anymore. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. Neither am I. He smiled, stepping closer. For what it's worth, Melissa, you did everything right. He's perfect. I exhaled shakily. He's ours. The word hung between us, fragile and sacred. It felt like both a confession and a prayer. That night, after Anthony left, I sat by Ethan's bedside, watching him sleep. The rain tapped softly on the window again, the same sound that had followed me since the night I met his father. I ran my fingers through his curls and whispered, You have his eyes, baby, but you also have my heart. And maybe that's what love and fate really mean. Not perfect timing, just the right people, eventually. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of the future, because maybe the past wasn't something I had to run from anymore. Maybe it had led me here, exactly where I was meant to be.
It's strange how love can survive in silence, how it can wait patiently, stubbornly, beneath all the years, the pain, and the things left unsaid. After that Sunday, Anthony became a quiet constant in our lives. He didn't rush anything. He called sometimes to ask about Ethan's favorite foods, his bedtime stories, the little details only a parent would care to know. He visited on weekends, never uninvited, never overstepping. And Ethan adored him. At first, I told myself it was fine, harmless. But the truth was, watching them together was undoing me in slow motion. The first time Ethan called him Tony, I saw Anthony's eyes glisten. The first time Anthony taught him to fly a paper plane, and Ethan's laughter filled the room, I felt my walls begin to crumble. And the first time I caught Anthony looking at me, not with longing, but with quiet gratitude, I realized how dangerous hope could be. One evening, after Ethan fell asleep, Anthony lingered by the window, his silhouette outlined against the city lights. He's amazing, he said softly. You did that, Melissa. I smiled faintly. We did. He turned toward me, his expression unreadable. You don't know how many nights I wished I could go back to that masquerade just to ask your name before I walked away. I laughed quietly. You didn't walk away, Anthony. Life pulled you. He looked down, his voice rough, and I let it. We fell silent, the air between us thick with everything we hadn't said. The faint hum of traffic below sounded almost like a heartbeat. Finally, he spoke. I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago. My pulse quickened. What is it? He hesitated, eyes full of regret. That night at the masquerade, I wasn't supposed to be there. What do you mean? I went because I was running. From responsibility, from grief. My father and we weren't speaking. The company was collapsing. My engagement had just ended. He stopped himself, meeting my eyes. I thought I was lost. And then I saw you. You were light, real. For the first time in years, I felt alive. My chest tightened. You were engaged? He nodded slowly. It was ending. She'd left before that night, but not cleanly. I should have told you. You didn't deserve to be anyone's escape. I turned away, the truth slicing through me like cold air. So I was just a moment of freedom. No, he said, his voice breaking. You were the first thing that ever felt true. That's why I couldn't find the courage to tell you who I was. That night, I wanted to be someone better, someone who hadn't already ruined everything. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to throw those words back at him, but I couldn't, because I understood. Haven't we all wanted to be someone else for one night? I don't know what to do with that, I said quietly. You were real to me, Anthony, and so was that night. It was real, he said, stepping closer. Every second of it. Tears welled in my eyes. But how do I trust you now? He swallowed hard. You don't have to. Just let me earn it. The weeks that followed were slow and fragile. We found a rhythm, shared dinners, storybooks, small conversations that tiptoed around the past. Ethan began drawing 3 stick figures in his coloring book, Mommy, me, and Tony. It was so innocent, so hopeful. It hurt. But inside me, the battle raged on between forgiveness and fear, between the woman I'd become and the one who still remembered that kiss under the chandeliers. Then one night, I broke. It was late. Ethan was asleep. I'd been up editing a manuscript, another second-chance love story that felt too close to mine. When Anthony knocked softly at the door, I almost didn't answer, but I did. He stood there holding a small box. He brought this for Ethan. It's a compass. My father gave it to me when I was little. I thought maybe... Come in, I said, my voice trembling. He stepped inside, and suddenly the air shifted. It wasn't about gifts or gestures anymore. It was about truth. Melissa, he said quietly, I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I know I'll never stop trying to be the man who does. I looked at him, really looked at him. The guilt in his eyes, the sincerity in his tone, the ache of someone who had carried regret too long. And I realized that holding on to pain was like holding my breath. It kept me alive, but not living. I took a step closer. I said, You hurt me, not by leaving, but by letting silence fill the space where honesty should have been. He knows, he said, voice barely above a whisper. And if I could go back, you can't. I interrupted softly. Neither of us can. But maybe we can go forward. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Together? I didn't answer right away. I just reached for the compass in his hand and turned it over. On the back, engraved faintly, were the words, Find your way home. I said, maybe this is what that means. He smiled then, soft, disbelieving, like a man seeing spring after years of winter. And then, gently, he reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. It wasn't the passion of that first kiss. It was something deeper, quiet, healing, real. like forgiveness wearing the face of love. That night after he left, I sat by Ethan's bed again, watching him sleep with the compass beside him. I thought about everything that had led us here. The masquerade, the years of silence, the blue eyes that refused to fade from my memory. And I realized something. Love isn't about perfect timing. It's about returning, over and over, to the same place inside your heart where hope never stopped waiting. The heart remembers, even when we try to forget.
There's a moment in every story when everything quiets, not because the chaos is gone, but because you finally made peace with it. For me, that moment came on a Sunday morning in early spring. Ethan was running through the park, chasing bubbles that shimmered like tiny rainbows in the sunlight. Anthony stood a few feet away, watching him with a look that broke me a little every time I saw it. Half joy, half disbelief, all love. It had been 3 months since the night he told me the truth. 3 months of slow, careful healing, of shared mornings at the playground, of late-night talks that started with small confessions and ended with laughter we didn't think we were capable of anymore. Forgiveness wasn't sudden. It came in pieces. The way he'd carry Ethan on his shoulders. The way he'd ask about my day. Really listening. The way he never once tried to rewrite the past, only to write something better in its place. I remember the first time Ethan called him Dad. It happened accidentally. Ethan was showing him a picture he'd drawn. "Look, Dad, it's us." Anthony froze, his eyes glistening. He didn't correct him. He just whispered, "That's perfect, buddy." I turned away, my throat tightening, because in that one word, years of silence dissolved. A few days later, Anthony asked if we could go somewhere, he said. He drove us to the coast, to a quiet spot overlooking the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of gold and rose. He said, "This was my father's favorite place. Whenever life got too heavy, he'd come here and say, 'Let the sea take what you can't carry.'" He smiled faintly. "I think he'd like that we're here." We sat in silence, listening to the waves. Ethan ran along the shore, his laughter carried by the wind. "You know," I said softly, "for a long time, I thought love was supposed to be easy, that if it hurt, it wasn't right." Anthony looked at me, eyes warm. "And now?" I said, "Now I think love is supposed to change you, to strip away who you were and make space for who you're meant to be." He nodded, gaze on the horizon. "Then maybe that's what we are, who we were always meant to become." I smiled. Maybe fate was just waiting for us to be ready. He turned to me then, his expression raw, unguarded. "Melissa, I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful you let me find you again." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and possibility, and for the first time in years, I let myself lean into the warmth of his hand, unafraid. That night, after Ethan fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home, Anthony reached across the console and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For believing in second chances, even when I didn't deserve one." I smiled through the quiet tears that came. "You didn't need to deserve it, Anthony. You just needed to show up." He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm not leaving again." And I knew he meant it, not as a promise born of guilt, but as truth born of growth. Months later, on a warm summer afternoon, the three of us stood in our small backyard. Ethan was blowing bubbles again, each one catching the sunlight. I watched him run through them, giggling, arms wide open like he was trying to catch the whole sky. Anthony slipped his arm around me. "He's happy," he said quietly. "He's loved," I replied. "That's all that matters." He looked at me, his smile tender. "And you? Are you happy?" I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill me like a prayer. "I am," I said, for the first time in a long time. He kissed my forehead. Then I guess we both found our way home. Later that evening, after Ethan was tucked in, I sat by the window with my journal, the same one I'd kept through every heartbreak, every beginning. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Some loves aren't meant to be perfect. They're meant to be real. And sometimes what feels like an ending is just the beginning written in another language, the language of forgiveness, growth, and time." I paused, my pen hovering. Outside, the stars were faint but steady, like reminders that even in darkness, something always shines. And as I looked toward Ethan's room, where I could hear his soft breathing, I thought about the eyes that had started it all, the ones I met at a masquerade, the ones that found me again years later in the face of our son. Love had come full circle, not as a fairy tale, but as something better, something real. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are in the world, if you've ever loved, lost, or waited for life to make sense again, let me tell you this. Even the love that seemed lost can return, not always in the way you expect, but in the way you need. Because some hearts aren't finished when they break. They're just beginning to learn how to heal. And if my story reminds you of your own, I hope you'll tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Possible Hearts for more real stories, real hearts, and real possibilities. Because sometimes love doesn't find us when we're ready. It finds us when we've finally learned how to stay.